Why was she still here? 18 months ago, Captain Sloan Mercer was the youngest decorated combat pilot in the U.S. Air Force, a name whispered with respect in briefing rooms and flight lines alike. Today, she was flying toilet paper, morphine and rations across Iraqi airspace, her once glorious wings reduced to hauling supplies in an unarmed C-130 Hercules. They called her Raven back then, a name that once stood for precision, confidence, and lethal grace. Now, it was little more than a joke murmured in the hangars of Al-Assad Air Base. Everyone knew her story. Everyone thought they knew her failure. But none of them were there that day over Fallujah, when she made a choice that saved 42 civilians and cost 8 Marines their lives. That single decision ended her combat career. Officially, it was reassignment due to judgment concerns. Unofficially, she'd been exiled to purgatory, flying cargo, forgotten. The engines roared as the ramp of the C-130 sealed shut behind her. The metallic clang echoed through the fuselage, like a steel door closing on her past. "Last pallet secure, ma'am," called Specialist Sky Disgay, barely 22, all nerves and excitement. Sloan managed a faint nod. Sky reminded her of herself once before the doubt, before the sleepless nights replaying the same decision over and over. Sloan turned back toward the cockpit. Her co-pilot, Captain Beckett Reeves, static to his friends, was already running through pre-flight checks. He'd volunteered to fly with her when no one else would. Maybe it was loyalty, maybe pity. Sloan never asked. "All systems green," he said. "Weather's clear, no enemy chatter on our corridor. Should be an easy flight to Phoenix." "Easy." She almost smiled. Nothing ever was. "Tower, this is Cargo 27 requesting clearance for departure. Flight plan filed for FOB Phoenix, over." The reply came crisp and impersonal. "Cargo 27, you are cleared for departure. Runway 23. Winds light, visibility unlimited. Contact departure control once airborne." Unlimited visibility. If only that applied to the future, she thought. The engines thundered, 4 turboprops pulling 80,000 pounds of steel and cargo into motion. The runway blurred beneath her, the air shimmering with heat. 60 knots, Beckett called out. 80 knots, rotate. Sloan pulled back on the yoke. The C-130's nose lifted, heavy and deliberate, and the aircraft climbed into a sky that felt more like exile than freedom. It wasn't the F-16. It didn't dance, it lumbered. But it was hers. For now. As Al-Assad fell away beneath them, Beckett broke the silence. "You're quiet today, more than usual." "Didn't sleep." "You never do." He knew her too well. He knew the nightmares. The ones that always ended the same way, a target building in Fallujah, civilians inside, orders screaming in her headset to strike anyway. Rules of engagement said she did the right thing. But 8 Marines still died 3 days later. She didn't believe in right or wrong anymore, only consequences. "Did you hear?" Beckett asked, trying to steer her thoughts somewhere else. "Falcon Hartley's back on base." Sloan sighed. Lieutenant Maxwell Falcon Hartley, her old squadron mate, fast jet, faster mouth. He once admired her. Then, after her demotion, he stopped mentioning her name at all. "Let's hope he keeps his ego in the hangar," she muttered. Beckett chuckled. "Yeah, good luck with that." The desert stretched out below, endless beige and brown, scarred by decades of war. Thin rivers of green traced the path of the Euphrates. Villages clung to its banks, fragile and enduring. "Ever wonder what it's like down there?" Sloan asked quietly. "To live where every sunrise sounds like artillery." Beckett considered it. "I think about it sometimes. At least we're helping food, medicine, water." "Helping," she echoed. The word hung in the cockpit like a ghost. For a long while, only the hum of the engines filled the silence. Then the radio cracked to life. "Any coalition aircraft on this frequency, this is Rampart 1 actual. We are in contact with enemy forces and require immediate air support. Extraction birds are down. Multiple wounded. We are under heavy fire." Sloan's hand froze over the throttle. Beckett's eyes snapped toward her. "Rampart 1, Delta Force." Her pulse quickened. "Grid coordinates incoming." The voice was strained, loud, desperate. "We've got 6 operators pinned down 80 kilometers southwest of Al-Assad. Request immediate air support." Beckett's expression hardened. "That's Sullivan's team, Delta. If they're calling on open frequency, it's bad." Sloan's mind was already running calculations. Distance, speed, armament. They were 20 minutes away, but they were a cargo plane, no guns, no missiles, no authorization. No chance. Except the nearest fighters from Balad were 40 minutes out. The Delta team had 40 minutes to live. Beckett saw it in her eyes. "Sloan, don't. You know what this means." She keyed the mic. "Rampart 1 actual, this is Cargo 27. We're a C-130 20 minutes from your position. Unarmed, but available to assist." There was a pause, then a voice filled with disbelief and hope. "Cargo 27, any support is better than none. We'll take whatever you can give." "Roger that," Sloan said, her tone steady. "Adjusting course now." Beckett exhaled slowly. "We're about to commit career suicide." "Maybe," Sloan replied. "But I'm done letting people die because I followed the rules." The aircraft banked hard to the west. The sun caught the edge of her flight helmet, a silver flash against desert gold. Moments later, another voice came over the radio, cold, clipped, bureaucratic. "Cargo 27, this is Al-Assad operations. You have deviated from your filed flight plan. State your intentions." Sloan kept her voice calm. "Responding to distress call from friendly forces under fire, providing coordination for incoming air support." Static silence, then. "Captain Mercer, you are not authorized for combat support. Resume your original course immediately." Sloan closed her eyes. Major Whitfield, the one who'd buried her after Fallujah. "Negative, Al-Assad," she said evenly. "Friendly forces are in imminent danger. We're the only asset available." "You're an unarmed cargo plane," he barked. "That's an order." Mercer turned back now. Beckett winced. "He's not wrong." Sloan's grip tightened on the yoke. "Neither was I over Fallujah." There was a long pause. Then she said it, the words that would end her military career. "Al-Assad operations, I copy your order, and I'm choosing to disregard it." Beckett didn't even try to stop her. He just sighed and flipped on the external cameras. "Well, guess I'm going down with you again, Raven." "Wouldn't have it any other way." In the cargo hold, Specialist Sky heard everything. She unbuckled and stepped into the cockpit doorway. "Captain, what do you need me to do?" Sloan looked back at her, so young, so brave. "Secure everything. We may need to maneuver hard." And Sky. "Yes, ma'am." "Put on your armor." Outside, the desert blurred into pale streaks beneath the wings. Through the glass, Sloan saw smoke in the distance, faint, purple, curling into the hot sky. "Visual on smoke," Beckett called. 5 clicks out, that's them." "God," Sloan whispered. Through binoculars, she saw flashes muzzle fire from both sides. The compound was surrounded. Sullivan's voice came back over the radio, rough and fatting. "Cargo 27, we've got enemy on all sides, 50, maybe more. They've got anti-air weapons. We're running low on ammo." Sloan's heart pounded. No weapons, no authorization, no support. Just one dying team on the ground and a pilot who'd already failed once. "Rampart 1, confirm smoke. We've got eyes on your position." "Affirmative, purple smoke marks us. Enemies west ridge, north buildings." Her mind raced. What could a cargo plane do? Then an idea. Dangerous, absurd, maybe possible. "Static," she said, her voice calm, now too calm. "What's our cargo weight?" 18,000 pounds. Ammo, MREs, medical kits. His eyes widened. "Oh no, you're not thinking." She was. "Beckett, we've got gravity, we've got pallets, we've got altitude, let's weaponize physics." He stared at her. "You're talking about dropping supplies as bombs. You got a better idea." He hesitated. "No, which is the terrifying part?" The radio crackled again. Sullivan's voice returned. 2-7, if you can disrupt the western ridge, we can move the wounded." "Copy that. Stand by for distraction." "Wait," Beckett said. "You realize this is insane." "Static," she replied softly. "So was following the rules in Fallujah." He didn't argue again. The C-130 turned in a wide arc, its shadow gliding across the sand. The engine strained as Sloan lined up the approach. Through the cockpit glass, the ridge loomed, dotted with muzzle flashes. "Lightning, ready on cargo release," Sloan ordered over intercom. "Ready, Captain," Sky's voice came, shaky but determined. "3 pallets armed and standing by. This is the craziest thing I've ever done." "Noted, 30 seconds to drop." Tracers streaked the sky. Bullets pinged off the fuselage and metallic thuds echoing through the hull. Beckett's knuckles whitened on the controls. "Taking fire. No critical systems hit yet." Sloan's jaw tightened. "Hold her steady." 15 seconds, Sky called. "Release in 5, Sloan said, eyes locked on the ridge. 4, 3, 2, drop." The aircraft lurched as 3 pallets, each weighing thousands of pounds, tore free from the ramp and plunged toward the earth. "Pallets away," Sky shouted. The C-130 pulled up, engine screaming as the cargo struck. The ground erupted, not in fire but chaos. Containers shattered, ammo crates detonated from impact, sending shockwaves through enemy lines. Fighters scattered. Gunfire faltered. "Holy hell," Beckett breathed. "It actually worked." "Rampart 1, this is Cargo 2-7. You're clear to move." Sullivan's reply came over bursts of gunfire, urgent but alive. "You just bought us 30 seconds of breathing room. Moving now. Thank you, 2-7. Sloan exhaled, the first real breath she'd taken in hours. But she knew this wasn't over, not even close. Beckett was already scanning instruments. "We took hits to hydraulics, engine 3's running rough. Can we make another pass?" "Maybe one." Sloan looked down at the compound, at the men running through dust and smoke, tiny figures clinging to life. "Then one's enough." The radio hissed, carrying Sullivan's voice again. "Cargo 2-7, we still have contact north side. They're regrouping fast." "Copy," Sloan said, banking hard into another turn. "We're coming back." The C-130 dipped low, sunlight glinting off its battered wings as it swung back toward the fight. And in that moment, somewhere between courage and madness, Sloan Mercer, the pilot they'd written off, became what she was always meant to be again. Not a cargo hauler. Not a disgrace. But a soldier. She pushed the throttles forward. The engines roared. And the sky answered. What made her think she could win this? A cargo pilot, flying a lumbering, unarmed plane into a gunfight against trained fighters led by a former Iraqi Air Force commander. Even she didn't fully believe it, but belief was what drove her now. It was something older, darker, the need to make right what had once gone so terribly wrong. "Static, what's our remaining payload?" she asked, eyes fixed on the horizon. Beckett's voice came low, controlled, his fingers dancing across the console. "Water drums, MRE cases, some construction gear bound for Phoenix. Maybe 2 tons total." "Rig them," she said. He looked at her. "Sloan, our hydraulics are bleeding out. Engine 3's giving me warnings. Another pass might finish us." Her jaw set. They don't have time to wait for the F-16s. A pause, then Beckett nodded slowly. "Copy that, rigging emergency drop." He didn't agree. He didn't need to. Trust was enough. Behind them, Specialist Sky was already moving through the cargo bay, strapping, latching, locking, her young hands trembling but never stopping. Fear was normal. Courage was what came next. In the cockpit, Sloan adjusted altitude. The C-130 descended through the haze, skimming low enough that the smell of burnt powder began to creep through the vents. The radio hissed. Sullivan's voice cut through static, rough, strained, barely holding together. Cargo 27, this is Rampart 1. We're in new position east of the compound, but they're regrouping fast. Ammunition low. We've got maybe 10 minutes of rounds left. Understood, Sloan replied. Her voice was calm, but her pulse was. 10 minutes. That was all they had to stop an entire platoon of enemy fighters. Static, what's the situation on the ground? Thermal feeds picking up 20+ signatures. Coordinated fire. They're repositioning for flanking. These aren't amateurs, Sloan. They're soldiers, she said quietly. He's trained them. Who? She hesitated. Commander Samir Al-Qadri, former Iraqi Air Force. I flew against his wingman once years ago. He's methodical, precise. If he's leading this ambush, Sullivan's team won't survive a head-on fight. Beckett turned, studying her face. How do you know it's him? I can feel it. It wasn't arrogance. It was instinct, the kind only born from 1,000 hours in combat skis. There was a pattern in the enemy's coordination, a rhythm in the way they moved, controlled chaos, the kind that only came from a pilot's mind orchestrating ground fire. And if Al-Qadri was down there, he'd already calculated her moves. The comms crackled again. Cargo 27, this is Al-Assad Operations. Major Whitfield's voice snapped through. You are ordered to disengage and return to base immediately. Captain Mercer, this is not negotiable. Sloan closed her eyes for half a second. She could almost see his face back at the base, the same tight expression he'd worn during her hearing after Fallujah, the same man who told her, Mercer, rules exist for a reason. Maybe. But sometimes rules cost lives. She keyed the mic. Negative, Al-Assad. We are already engaged in support operations. We'll comply once Delta is secure. Mercer, you are ending your career with this decision. Her response was quiet. Sir, my career ended 18 months ago. She cut the line. Beckett gave her a sidelong glance. Remind me never to get on your bad side. You already are. He grinned faintly. Fair. Sloan took a breath. All right, let's make history. She rolled the C-130 into a wide, descending turn, the engines growling as the massive plane dipped into hostile airspace. Tracers reached up from the ridge, green arcs of light tearing across the sky. The hull rattled as rounds hit metal. Sparks flared along the right wing. Taking fire, Beckett called. Engine 3's losing temp control. Keep her steady. Steady's not in this plane's vocabulary right now. The ridge line filled her view, enemy muzzle flashes bright against the sand. She could see them clearly now, figures with discipline, moving tactically, flanking in pairs. Al-Qadri soldiers. Sloan's mind went blank except for one sound, the rush of wind through the cabin and the faint heartbeat of the engines that still worked. Lightning status. Ready to drop, Captain. Sky's voice came back, breathless. I've got 8 water drums and 3 crates of construction material locked in. Good, on my mark, 3, 2, 1, drop. The pallets slid free, weight vanishing from the plane's belly. They fell like thunder, slamming into the northern sector of the village. Walls crumbled, dust clouds erupted. The shockwave rippled through enemy ranks, scattering formations, breaking their momentum. Impact confirmed, Beckett shouted. Multiple enemy positions disrupted. The radio flared with Sullivan's voice again. Beautiful work, Cargo 27. We're moving now. Hold them off just a little longer. Copy that, Sloan said, climbing hard to 8,000 feet. The altimeter ticked upward, but the aircraft groaned in protest. Warning lights flickered across the console, amber and red. Hydraulic pressure dropping, engine 3 faltering. They were bleeding out in the sky. Then a new voice filled the comms. Calm, cold, male, speaking perfect English. Coalition aircraft, this is Commander Samir Al-Qadri. Sloan froze. I compliment your creativity, Captain. Weaponizing cargo, an interesting tactic, but you cannot sustain this. You are damaged, low on fuel and without authorization. Withdraw while you still can. Beckett stared at the radio. Did he just address us? Sloan keyed her mic. Her voice was steady, almost polite. Commander Al-Qadri, I appreciate your tactical concern, but you might consider withdrawing your forces before additional air support arrives. A soft laugh echoed back. Courage and arrogance are separated by a thin line, Captain. You've crossed it. The line went dead. Beckett swallowed. He knows exactly who you are. I know, she whispered, and he knows I won't back down. Outside, the desert shimmered beneath them. Smoke curled from burning vehicles, and far below, 6 men, 6 Americans, fought for their lives behind a crumbling wall. Static, what's our loiter time? He checked the gauges. 45 minutes of fuel if we keep it level, maybe 30 if we keep diving. Then we've got 30 minutes to keep them alive. She throttled forward. Let's go again. Beckett didn't argue. He just muttered, this is either the bravest or stupidest thing you've ever done. Sloan almost smiled, probably both. She pushed the C-130 down into another dive. The horizon tilted, and the desert leapt toward them. Enemy tracers streaked upward again. Bullets hammered the fuselage, punching through the hull with metallic screams. One round shattered a side panel, showering the cockpit with fragments. Hydraulics Alpha at 60%, Beckett shouted. We're losing control authority. Hold it, she barked. The nose leveled, engines howling. They roared over the northern ridge at just 500 feet, close enough to see the whites of the fighter's eyes. The sound of 4 propellers at full throttle drowned out everything else. The shockwave rippled through the dust, disorienting the enemy below. She pulled back hard, climbing again. The aircraft strained, metal groaning under pressure. Beckett exhaled shakily. You trying to give me a heart attack? Not yet, she said. We might still need you. Then the comms hissed again. Sullivan's voice tight and fast. Cargo 27, they're pushing from the north and west simultaneously. We can't hold them both. Sloan looked at Beckett. We're out of cargo. Then we use what's left. He frowned. What's left? Her lips parted in a small, reckless smile. Us. He blinked. You're joking. Psychological warfare. We keep flying low, fast, close enough to make them think we're armed. Keep them disorganized until the jets arrive. Beckett laughed, not with humor but disbelief. So, we scare them into survival. Exactly. She keyed the mic. Rampart 1, we're going to keep making low passes. Stay ready to move when we do. Sullivan didn't hesitate. Roger that, 27, and Captain, whatever happens, thank you. Sloan didn't respond. She was already pushing the throttles forward. The C-130 screamed down again, diving toward the battlefield. Dust erupted beneath them, soldiers scattering, ducking from the roar of the engines. The sheer size and noise of the plane shattered coordination on the ground. They're falling back, Beckett yelled. You're actually scaring them. Good, she said. Let's make them terrified. She banked left, pulling another low pass, barely a few hundred feet above the sand. Bullets tore through the air again, tracers slicing past the cockpit. One round grazed the wing, another ripped through a hydraulic line. The warning alarms howled. Beckett's voice was tight. Hydraulics down to 40%. Another hit and we lose control. Sloan gritted her teeth. Then we don't get hit. Her hands tightened on the yoke. Every muscle in her arms screamed against the resistance. The aircraft was fighting her, wounded, dying, but still airborne. F-16s are 10 minutes out, Beckett said. We just need to last 10 more minutes. Then we last 11, she said. And somehow she did. The next pass was even lower. She could see them now, men scrambling for cover, helmets glinting in sunlight. Some firing upward blindly, others shouting orders into radios. In that chaos, Sloan felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. Not the kind from medals or flight logs. The kind that came from doing the right thing, no matter who told you not to. But then a flash, a streak of smoke. RPG left side, Beckett shouted. Sloan jerked the yoke, the rocket whistling past so close the shockwave slammed against their fuselage. The aircraft rolled, instruments flashing red. Left aileron hit, Beckett barked. We're losing control authority. Recovering, she said through clenched teeth. Hold on. The plane wobbled violently, dipping toward the ground before she wrestled it back level. Her arms trembled. Sweat ran down her neck. Remind me why we didn't just retire, Beckett muttered. Because we're not built for peace, she said. Silence. Only the hum of broken machinery and the distant rattle of gunfire below. The radio crackled again. Cargo 27, this is Falcon 11. 2 F-16s inbound. ETA 6 minutes. Sloan almost collapsed with relief. Copy, Falcon. You're cleared hot on Western Ridge. Friendlies marked with purple smoke. Roger that. We see your bird too, Raven. Hell of a show you're putting on down there. Raven. It had been so long since she'd heard her call sign. Beckett gave her a faint grin. Guess the bird's still flying. Barely, she said, voice low, but still flying. Outside, the sunlight blazed off the wings. The C-130 limped across the sky, riddled with bullet holes, engines coughing, controls sluggish, but it stayed airborne. Below, the Delta team was still alive. And for now, that was enough. She exhaled slowly. The radio filled with new sounds, the distant roar of jet engines approaching fast. Sloan closed her eyes, just for a heartbeat. The sound of those jets felt like redemption, tearing through the air to finish what she started. And in that moment, she remembered something her old flight instructor used to say. Courage isn't flying into danger. It's flying when you know you might not come back. The sky shimmered. The jets roared closer. And Captain Sloan Mercer, the pilot they once called a disgrace, held her wounded aircraft steady, ready for whatever came next. How do you land a plane that shouldn't still be flying? Sloan didn't know, but she was about to find out. The 2 F-16s streaked overhead, twin flashes of sunlight and thunder. They ripped across the sky like vengeance itself, banking sharply before diving toward the western ridge. Seconds later, the ground below erupted in fire. Good hits, Beckett shouted, watching the radar light up. Falcons are cleaning them up. Sloan's shoulders eased for the first time in hours. Smoke curled into the pale desert sky, the sound of the jets fading into the distance. Then Sullivan's voice cut through the static, urgent, hoarse. Cargo 27, we've got wounded who can't move. Enemies retreating, but we need immediate evac before they regroup. Beckett turned to her. They're asking us to evac. Sloan, look at this thing, we're half dead ourselves. She glanced at the damage indicators, hydraulic pressure down to 30%, one engine sputtering, fuel leaking. It was madness, but leaving those men behind wasn't an option. How many? She asked into the mic. 6 total, 3 ambulatory, 3 critical. LZ is a dirt road east of the compound. Sloan's mind spun. A dirt road, 200 meters long at best. No navigation aids, no lights, no guarantees, just sand and luck. She met Beckett's eyes. Can we put her down? He hesitated. Technically, no. Realistically, also no. Then we'll try anyway. He sighed, resigned. Of course we will. Sloan keyed the radio again. Rampart 1, this is Cargo 27. Mark your LZ with purple smoke. We'll make an approach from the east. Be ready to load fast. I don't know how long I can hold her on the ground." Sullivan's voice came back instantly. "Copy 2-7. You're our miracle bird today." She didn't feel like a miracle. She felt like a woman balancing between defiance and self-destruction. "Static," she said, her voice quieter now. "If this goes wrong, you eject the second we touch down. Don't wait for me." He turned sharply. "Not happening. If you go down, I go down." "Beckett." No argument. "We started this together. We end it together." Their eyes locked, not in drama, but in the unspoken language of soldiers who have already accepted death once before. She nodded once, then "Let's bring them home." The desert stretched out ahead, shimmering, endless. In the distance, she could see the faint purple smoke marking the landing zone. Sloan took a long breath and began the descent. "Gear down," she ordered. Beckett flipped the switch. The landing gear groaned as it extended, one wheel stuttering before locking into place. "3 greens barely," he said. "Barely counts." The C-130 sank lower, its shadow crawling across the dunes. Wind buffeted the wings, dust swirling in the updraft. "Speed 190, Beckett called. "Altitude 300 feet. Sloan's focus narrowed to the smoke ahead. The dirt road appeared through the haze, uneven, rough, barely long enough for a landing. "Flaps 20. "Flaps 20 said. The plane shuddered, losing speed. Every warning light on the console seemed to scream at once. "Hydraulics at 20%, Beckett said grimly. "We lose one more system, we're done." "Then we don't lose one." The road grew larger, closer. Beckett's hands hovered near the emergency controls. 200 feet, 150, 100. The tires hit dirt, hard. The C-130 slammed down, bouncing once, twice. The left gear screamed in protest, metal grinding against sand. Sloan fought the yoke, muscles straining, trying to keep the bird straight. The entire cockpit shook violently, dust flooding in through the vents. "Brake, brake," Beckett shouted. "Trying." They skidded down the road, the plane fishtailing wildly. Dust roared around them like a sandstorm. Then finally it slowed. The tail swung around, settling with a shuddering groan. "Silence." Then Beckett laughed, half-crazed. "You're insane." Sloan smiled faintly. "You're welcome." The rear ramp dropped, hydraulic fluid hissing. Hot desert wind blasted through the cargo hold. "Go," she shouted into the intercom. Sky was already moving, jumping down from the ramp with her rifle raised. "Rampart team, move, move." Figures emerged through the smoke, Delta operators, bloodied and limping, dragging wounded men between them. The smell of cordite and burning oil filled the air. Sullivan was last, carrying a man over his shoulder. His face was streaked with dust and sweat. "Captain Mercer," he said as he approached, disbelief flickering across his features. "That's right," she said. "Now get your people in before this bird decides she's had enough." They loaded fast, trained efficiency born from desperation. Sky and Beckett helped strap the wounded down, morphine syringes trembling in young hands. Sloan stayed in the cockpit, scanning the horizon. "Static, talk to me." "Everyone in, ramps closing." "Copy, hold on." She throttled forward, the engine screaming in protest. The C-130 lurched, wheels spinning through sand before finally catching traction. Come on," she whispered. The plane crawled forward, shaking, fighting the drag of soft earth. "Speed 60, 70, Beckett read off. "Rotate." The nose lifted, barely. The aircraft shuddered, skimming the ground before clawing its way back into the air. Cheers erupted from the cargo hold. Sullivan's voice came through the intercom. "You're out of your damn mind, Mercer, but I owe you my life." Sloan didn't answer. Her hands were still locked on the controls. "Static," she said quietly. "Engine 3's gone." Beckett checked the gauges. The needle was falling fast. We've got maybe 15 minutes of flight time left before we lose altitude. Nearest base. Phoenix is out of range. Al-Assad's closer, 50 clicks northeast. Sloan hesitated. They'll court-martial me the moment we land. Beckett gave a grim smile. Then let's at least make it a dramatic entrance. She almost laughed, almost. The radio buzzed again. Cargo 27, this is Falcon 11. We're overhead. We see you've picked up the Delta boys. Nice work down there. Sloan keyed the mic. Appreciate the cover, Falcon. We're limping back to Al-Assad. One engine down, minor hydraulic loss. Copy that, we'll escort you in. You've earned it. The escort jets fell into formation beside her, sleek, deadly shapes glinting in sunlight. For a moment, Sloan felt a flicker of something close to pride. But it faded quickly. She looked down at her hands trembling, smeared with grease and dust. Static, she said softly. You ever wonder what the point of it all is? We saved 6 today, but we've lost hundreds before. What does it add up to? He glanced over, his voice gentle now. It adds up to this moment, to doing the right thing even when it costs everything. Her throat tightened. She didn't trust herself to answer. Below, the desert rolled by, silent and endless. The adrenaline began to fade, replaced by exhaustion. Minutes passed. The base appeared on the horizon, a cluster of hangars and runways shimmering in the afternoon heat. Al-Assad Tower, this is Cargo 27 requesting emergency landing. One engine out, multiple wounded on board. The reply was immediate. Cargo 27, you are cleared for runway 09. Emergency crews standing by. Beckett leaned back, exhaling. Guess they're expecting us. Yeah, she said quietly. Can't imagine Whitfield's thrilled. He gave her a sidelong grin. Then let's give him a landing he'll never forget. The C-130 descended, its shadow sliding across the tarmac. Emergency vehicles lined the runway. The gear touched down, smoother this time, almost graceful despite the damage. The plane rolled to a stop amid sirens and flashing lights. The ramp dropped. Medics rushed in, shouting orders. The Delta team was escorted out, stretchers rolling. Sullivan stopped halfway down the ramp and turned back to her. Captain Mercer, he said, voice steady despite exhaustion, what you did out there, I've seen men freeze, run, or panic. You didn't. You flew straight into hell. She met his eyes. And you crawled out of it, we're even. He smiled faintly, nodded once, and disappeared into the chaos outside. Beckett sat back in his seat, hands shaking. We actually did it. For now, Sloan said. And then the hangar doors opened. Major Whitfield stepped out, flanked by MPs. His expression was unreadable, a mixture of disbelief, fury, and something else. Respect, maybe. Captain Mercer, he said, voice sharp but steady, step away from the aircraft. Sloan unbuckled her harness, stood, and walked down the ramp. Dust swirled around her boots as she faced him. You directly disobeyed orders, he said. You endangered your crew, your aircraft, and your mission. Yes, sir, she said evenly. And you saved 6 American lives. Silence. Whitfield's jaw worked as if fighting itself. Finally, he said, you'll still face review, but not all violations deserve punishment. He turned to leave, then paused. Mercer, Fallujah wasn't your fault, not then, not now. She froze. The words hit harder than gunfire. Get some rest, he said quietly. You've earned it. Then he walked away. Sloan stood there for a long time, the wind whipping through her hair, the last heat of the day glinting off the bullet holes in her plane. Behind her, Beckett called out, You think we'll still have jobs tomorrow? She smiled faintly, doubt it. Then what do we do? She turned back toward the sunset, the light catching the edge of her eyes. We fly, she said softly, one way or another. The camera would fade there, her silhouette against the dying light, the battered plane behind her, the horizon ahead. a symbol of defiance, of quiet strength, of a soldier who refused to let the sky forget her name. How do you face the system you just defied to save lives? Sloan Mercer had never been afraid of combat, but the silence of a military inquiry room, that was a different kind of battlefield. The walls were white, the air too clean, the ticking of a clock too loud. She sat at a steel table in full uniform, the fabric stiff and pressed, a contrast to the bruises hidden beneath. Across from her, 3 officers studied their notes, lawyers, analysts, bureaucrats. And Major Whitfield sat at the center, expression carved from granite. "Captain Mercer," the senior officer began, "let's review the facts. You disregarded a direct order from Al-Assad operations, diverted an unarmed C-130 into active combat airspace, and engaged in actions resulting in substantial aircraft damage." "Yes, sir." "And yet," another added, "you successfully extracted 6 Delta operators, neutralized multiple hostile positions indirectly, and sustained no friendly fatalities." "Yes, sir." Whitfield leaned forward slightly. "So, Captain, was it worth it?" Sloan looked up. Her voice came quiet, even. "Every life is worth it, sir." Silence hung heavy in the room. Papers rustled, pens clicked. Somewhere a chair creaked. One of the officers sighed. "Captain, you've been a complicated figure in this command. Your service record is exemplary, but your decisions tend to challenge protocol." She didn't reply. He continued, "The official board has 2 recommendations. 1, honorable discharge with partial benefits. 2, reassignment to a non-combat support role pending psychiatric evaluation." Beckett, seated behind her as a witness, muttered under his breath, "That's bureaucratic talk for thank you and goodbye." Whitfield shot him a look. "Captain Reeves, you're here as an observer, not a commentator." Beckett sat back, hands raised. "Yes, sir." Sloan exhaled slowly. She'd expected this. The military was a machine that ran on obedience, not instinct. She'd been oil once, now she was grit in the gears. Whitfield's gaze lingered on her a beat too long. There was something behind his eyes, conflict, perhaps even regret. "This isn't easy for any of us, Mercer," he said finally. "But you knew what disregarding an order meant." She met his eyes. "I did, and I'd do it again." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The board adjourned. The door closed behind them with a click that sounded like a lock. Beckett stood, rubbing the back of his neck. "That went about as well as expected." "Could have been worse," Sloan said. "How?" "They could have thanked me." He laughed softly. "You know, most pilots would be celebrating right now. You pulled off something impossible." Sloan gave a faint smile. "I didn't do it alone." He looked at her, tired, proud, and a little broken too. "So what now?" "Now," she said, standing, adjusting her uniform, "now we wait for the machine to decide if I still belong to it." 3 days later, she was still waiting. The barracks at Al-Assad were quiet, the air thick with heat and dust. The smell of jet fuel hung faintly, mixing with sand and sweat. Sloan sat alone on her bunk, turning a flight patch over in her hands, the Raven insignia she hadn't worn in nearly 2 years. The patch was frayed at the edges, threads pulling loose, kind of like her. The door opened behind her, footsteps. She didn't look up. "Didn't think you'd be hiding," came a familiar voice. "Not hiding," she said, "just grounded." Beckett leaned against the doorframe. "You got visitors." She frowned. "Reporters." "Nope, black suits, no insignia, no smiles." Her stomach tightened. "Intelligence." He shrugged. "Looks like it, the kind that doesn't use names." Moments later, 2 figures entered, 1 man, 1 woman. Civilian attire, but their posture gave them away. The woman spoke first. "Captain Mercer, I'm Agent Lillian Gray. This is Director Thomas Hale. We're with the Defense Intelligence Agency." Sloan stood automatically. "Ma'am, sir." Relax, Hale said. His tone was calm, too calm. We're not here to reprimand you, in fact, quite the opposite. That was new. Gray continued. Your actions during the Delta extraction have generated considerable attention. Command is officially labeling it unauthorized heroism. Unofficially, they're calling it something else. What's that? Sloan asked. A miracle. Hale took a slow step closer. You saw the situation clearly, made decisions faster than command, and succeeded without authorization. That kind of initiative is rare, dangerous, but useful. Sloan narrowed her eyes. Useful for what? For something that doesn't exist. Not on paper, anyway, Hale said. A classified joint task unit, covert, mobile, minimal oversight. Operatives who can act when red tape won't. Beckett folded his arms. You're recruiting her, after threatening to court-martial her. Gray's lips curved slightly. The military doesn't waste proven assets, Captain Reeves. Sloan studied them. And what exactly would this unit do? Hale met her gaze. What you already do, Captain. Save lives in impossible situations, but off the record. She hesitated. And if I say no? Then you walk, Gray said simply. Clean record, honorable discharge, no more flying. That word, no more flying, hung like a weight in the air. Sloane's throat tightened. She looked down at her hands, at the faint oil stains that never really came off. Flying wasn't just a job, it was identity, breath, pulse. Hale saw it in her eyes. Think about it, but not too long. The world's getting darker, Captain, and the people who fight it can't afford indecision. They left as quietly as they came. The door closed, the silence returned. Beckett whistled low. They're spooks, Sloan. Once you sign with them, you don't come back the same. She sat on the bunk again, staring at the patch in her hand. Maybe I'm already not the same. He studied her. You thinking of taking it? She didn't answer immediately. You ever feel like the Air Force stopped needing us before we stopped needing it? Beckett nodded slowly. Yeah, every day. Then maybe this is how I keep doing something that matters. He exhaled. You know I'm coming if you go. I figured. For a while, they just sat there, two pilots with too many ghosts, staring at the patch between them like it was a doorway to something they both feared and craved. That night, Sloan walked the tarmac alone. The hangars were dark except for the faint hum of generators. The wind carried whispers of jet engines far off, sounds that always pulled at her chest. She stopped beside the C-130. Her C-130, the one she'd nearly died in. It sat battered, scarred, proud, like an old soldier waiting for orders that would never come. Her hand brushed the bullet holes along the fuselage. You held together, she whispered, even when I didn't. The metal was cold beneath her fingers, a reflection of herself, resilient but tired. Behind her, footsteps approached. She didn't turn. Didn't think you'd still be awake, Whitfield said. Couldn't sleep. He joined her in silence. They both stared at the plane, shadows stretching long across the concrete. You know, he said finally, I wanted to ground you for good after Fallujah. I told myself it was because you broke protocol. But really, it was because you reminded me of what I'd stopped being. Sloan glanced at him. What's that? A pilot who acts before he asks permission. She looked back at the horizon. That's not the kind of pilot the system wants anymore. He nodded. No, but it's the kind it still needs. The night wind rustled between them. Those DIA people came to see you, didn't they? He asked. Yes. You thinking of saying yes? I don't know, she said honestly. Feels like trading one cage for another. Maybe, Whitfield said, but sometimes the cage is the only thing that keeps you from falling apart. She smiled faintly. That's supposed to be comforting. Not really. They stood in silence again, the hum of the desert all around them. Finally, he said quietly, whatever you choose, don't do it because you're running from guilt. Do it because you're running toward purpose." She turned to him, "And if I can't tell the difference?" He gave a small, sad smile. "Then you'll figure it out up there. You always do." Then he walked away, leaving her alone with the hum of the plane and the sound of her own heartbeat. The next morning, she signed the papers. No applause, no ceremony, just a classified folder, a silent handshake, and a new badge with no insignia. When she walked out of that office, she was no longer Captain Sloan Mercer of the United States Air Force. She was something else now. Something without a name. Beckett was waiting by the jeep, leaning against the door. "So, where to, Raven?" She looked at him, sunlight catching the edge of her flight glasses. "Wherever they don't want us to go." He grinned. "Sounds like old times." She climbed into the passenger seat. The engine rumbled to life. As they pulled away from the base, she looked back one last time at the hangar, the tarmac, the sky she used to belong to. Maybe she still did, maybe not. But for the first time in a long time, she wasn't running from her past. She was flying toward something new. That evening, she received a sealed envelope with only 3 words inside. "Welcome to Shadow Wing." She read it twice, then folded it neatly into her pocket. The next mission had already begun, she just didn't know it yet. How do you fight a war no one admits exists? Sloan Mercer asked herself that question as the black transport jet cut through moonlight over northern Africa. The insignia on the fuselage had been scrubbed clean. No flag, no numbers, no trace of who they were or why they were there. That was the first rule of Shadow Wing. You belonged to no one and no one claimed you. She sat in the forward cabin, flight gloves resting in her lap, eyes on the desert far below. Endless sand, broken only by the faint glow of a burning village. Beside her, Beckett adjusted the mission tablet. Coordinates confirm we're 20 minutes out. Hostile presence moderate, but the area's unstable. Could turn ugly fast. Across from them, Agent Gray, now wearing tactical gear instead of a suit, glanced up. "Your objective is simple. Local NGO convoy ambushed by militia near the Algerian border. Survivors include American medical staff and 1 diplomat's daughter. Extraction only. No engagement unless fired upon." "Copy that," Sloan said. Gray's eyes lingered on her. "I've read your file, Captain. You don't do extraction only very well." Sloan met her gaze evenly. "I do what the situation demands." "Let's hope it doesn't demand much," Gray said, returning to her tablet. The hum of the engines filled the silence. It was a different kind of tension, not the roar of open combat, but the quiet before it. Sloane's fingers drummed against her leg, a habit she'd picked up since Fallujah. Every vibration of the aircraft carried through her bones. "Feels strange, doesn't it?" Beckett said softly. "No unit patch, no call sign, just ghosts with clearance." She gave a small smile. "We used to call that freedom. Now it feels like exile." She didn't disagree. Gray's voice cut in again. "We're dropping you two with a light scout team. Once you have the civilians, call for pickup. Satellite coverage is limited. Don't expect cavalry." Sloan raised an eyebrow. "So, standard government support, limited and late." Gray didn't smile. "Exactly." The aircraft descended into darkness, engines barely audible now. The ramp opened midair, and the desert wind howled through. Below, the land was fractured, dunes and ruins painted in silver moonlight. "Drop in 5, came the crew chief's voice. Sloan checked her gear, lightweight body armor, compact sidearm, comms headset. Nothing heavy. Covert, not combat. Beckett stood beside her, grinning despite himself. "You ever think we'd go back to jumping out of planes? Didn't think we'd live long enough for it." He laughed under his breath. "Fair." Then the light turned green. They jumped. The world fell away in silence. Just the rush of wind and the heartbeat in her ears. The desert stretched infinite beneath them, stars sharp and cold overhead. She hit ground hard but clean, rolling into a crouch. Dust rose around her boots. Beckett landed seconds later, his parachute collapsing beside him. They moved fast, cutting cords, sweeping gear. A third figure approached through the dark, NVG's glowing faint green. "Captain Mercer?" the voice asked. "Yeah." "Sergeant Imani Diallo, ground lead for Shadow Wing 3. Welcome to the edge of nowhere." Sloan shook her hand. "Status." "Convoys wrecked 2 clicks north. Locals say militia dragged survivors into the ruins." "How many hostiles?" "Unknown, 10, maybe 20, heavily armed." Beckett frowned. "And we're walking into that." Imani smiled faintly. "You wanted a mission, didn't you?" They set off through the sand, silent shadows against a ghostly landscape. The ruins appeared out of the dark an hour later, the remnants of an old trading outpost, half buried by centuries of wind. Smoke drifted from burning vehicles. The air smelled of oil, metal, and fear. Sloan crouched behind a dune, raising her binoculars. Through the lenses, she saw them. The hostages huddled inside a collapsed building, guarded by armed men with pickup trucks mounted with machine guns. She counted at least 12 hostiles, maybe more in the shadows. "Intel said light resistance," Beckett whispered. "Intel lies," Sloan replied. Imani tapped her shoulder. "If we move fast, we can hit from the south, grab the hostages, and exfil before they regroup." Sloan's mind raced, angles, lines of fire, timing. The old instincts stirred again, that cold, steady clarity that only came before chaos. "Beckett, cover from ridge. Imani with me. We move on my mark." He nodded. "Got your 6." They slipped forward through the sand, steps soundless. The moon dipped behind clouds, draping the world in darkness. At 30 meters, Sloan raised her fist. "Stop." Voices drifted from the camp, laughter, shouting, the metallic click of weapons being reloaded. She waited for the wind to pick up, masking their movement. Then she moved. Fast, silent, precise. 2 guards fell before they realized what was happening, one with a strike to the throat, the other with a suppressed round to the shoulder. Imani darted ahead, signaling clear. "Inside," Sloan whispered. They reached the building, stone walls cracked, ceiling half collapsed. The hostages flinched as they entered. A young woman looked up, blood on her face, eyes wide. Sloan crouched beside her. "American." The girl nodded shakily. "State Department, my team's gone, please, they'll come back." "We're getting you out," Sloan said. "Can you walk?" The girl nodded again, barely. Then a voice outside shouted in Arabic, alarmed, angry. "Contact," Beckett's voice came over comms. "They spotted the bodies. You've got 30 seconds before the camp lights up." "Understood," Sloan said, "moving now." They rushed from the building, the civilians between them. The first shots cracked through the night, muzzle flashes lighting the sand. "Move," she shouted. Bullets whipped through the air. Beckett fired from the ridge, precise bursts taking down gunners. Imani laid down, suppressing fire as Sloan pulled the girl behind cover. "Vehicle incoming," Beckett called. "Technical truck, heavy MG." Sloan's heart pounded. "We need that bird now." Static answered, the comms hissed. "Signal jammed," Imani shouted. Of course it was. They were on their own again. Beckett, eyes on the east ridge. "Copy, 2 trucks moving in fast." Sloan grabbed the radio, flipped to the emergency frequency. "Shadow Wing Air, this is ground team Mercer. We are pinned down, extraction site compromised." "Nothing." The girl beside her was crying softly. "Please, I can't." Sloan took her hand, firm but gentle. "You're not dying in this desert, do you understand? Not tonight." The words steadied her and herself. Imani crawled closer, reloading. "We're running out of options." Sloan looked around. Then her eyes caught something, a half-buried fuel truck near the wreckage. Options are what we make, she said. Cover me. Amani stared. You're not serious. Always am. Sloan dashed into the open. Bullets tore the sand around her feet. She reached the truck, yanked the hose, twisted the valve. Fuel spilled in dark ribbons across the ground. She pulled a flare from her vest, snapped it, and tossed it into the stream. The explosion split the night in half. The fireball ripped through the camp, throwing men and debris in all directions. The shockwave hit like a hammer, flattening the nearest truck. Beckett's voice came through again, static and disbelief. What the hell did you just do? Level the playing field. Through the flames, the surviving hostiles scattered. The chaos bought them seconds enough. Now, Sloan yelled, move. They sprinted toward the open desert, dragging the wounded. Beckett met them halfway, rifle slung across his back, face smeared with dust. Chopper inbound, he gasped. Signal came through after that blast. ETA. 2 minutes. Then we make those 2 minutes count. The roar of an approaching helo cut through the night, the sweetest sound she'd ever heard. The downwash of its rotors whipped the sand into a storm as it descended. Go, go, Amani shouted, helping the civilians aboard. Sloan turned back, firing one last burst into the advancing silhouettes. Then she climbed in, Beckett pulling her by the arm. The door slammed shut. The helo lifted off, flames shrinking beneath them. Below, the camp burned. The horizon glowed orange, then faded back into black. For a long time, no one spoke. Only the thrum of the rotor blades filled the silence. Finally, the young woman spoke, voice trembling. You came back for us. Sloan looked at her. That's the job. The girl's eyes filled with tears. No, you didn't have to. Sloan said nothing, because the girl was right, she hadn't had to. But she did anyway. Beckett leaned back against the wall, exhaling. You realize that explosion is going to make headlines. Not if we don't exist, Sloan said. He smirked faintly. Shadow wing, saving lives in the dark. Something like that. Outside, the desert stretched on endlessly, silent once more. Hours later, back at the covert airstrip, Sloan stood alone beside the hangar, watching the sunrise bleed across the horizon. The world looked peaceful from this distance, quiet, golden, deceptively calm. But she knew better. Agent Gray approached quietly, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. Hell of a night, Captain. Sloan didn't turn. We lost one of the NGO drivers. Gray nodded. You saved 9 others. That's a ratio I'll take. Doesn't make it right. Gray handed her the coffee. No, but it makes it matter. They stood in silence for a while. The light crept higher, painting the sand in gold. Command impressed, Gray said finally. You showed initiative, control, mercy. Mercy, Sloan echoed. The word felt heavy in her mouth. Gray studied her. You're wondering if you belong here. Sloan didn't answer. You do, Gray said quietly. But belonging doesn't mean believing, not anymore. Sloan turned to her. Then what does it mean? Gray's gaze was distant, reflective. It means you keep flying even when you do know why. The wind picked up, carrying dust and memory alike. Sloan looked out over the desert again. The dawn light caught the scar on her cheek, faint but permanent. Some scars never fade. Some become maps, reminders of where you've been and what you swore never to become. How do you fight an enemy who once taught you everything you know? Captain Sloan Mercer had asked herself that once, years ago, when she was still young enough to believe enemies came with uniforms. Now sitting in the dim operations bay of a silent airfield deep in Jordan, she wasn't sure she believed in enemies anymore. Just ghosts, some you hunted, some you carried. The screen in front of her flickered with satellite footage, a desert convoy, blurred by heat distortion. Agent Gray stood beside her, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Target package is confirmed, Gray said. The man in charge of that convoy, Coulson Crescent, has been supplying advanced guidance systems to regional militias. He's precise, disciplined, and never leaves survivors. Beckett leaned back in his chair, arms folded. Sounds like a regular charmer. Gray's gaze didn't shift. He was once Air Force. Sloan frowned. Hours. Gray hesitated. Technically, he was an exchange instructor for the Coalition Air Warfare Program, taught advanced flight coordination, disappeared 7 years ago during a training exchange. Sloan's stomach tightened. Something about the footage, the rhythm of the convoy, the spacing, the precision felt familiar. Gray tapped the screen. New intel from a downed drone suggests Crescent is organizing a full-scale arms route through western Syria. Your job is to identify and disrupt the network. Disrupt meaning? Beckett asked. Gray met his eyes. Whatever it takes. Sloan's voice came quiet. We're going after a ghost with training like ours. Gray nodded. Exactly, he knows our playbook, so throw it away. That night the operation brief ended, but Sloan couldn't sleep. The barracks were dark, the hum of distant generators barely audible. She sat by the window, the cool desert air brushing her face. On the desk before her was a faded photo, a group of pilots standing in front of a jet, their grins bright, the future wide open. She traced one face with her thumb, a man in his late 30s, eyes sharp, smile confident. Colonel David Rains, her mentor, her instructor, the man who taught her how to fly under fire and how to think like the enemy. He died in a training crash over the Mediterranean, or so she'd been told. She turned the photo over. The handwriting on the back was his. Remember, altitude saves the body, instinct saves the soul. Her chest tightened. She hadn't thought of that phrase in years. But now it echoed, uncomfortably loud. 2 days later, Shadow Wing deployed north. The team moved by night, a small convoy of unmarked vehicles slipping through canyons like ghosts. Imani rode shotgun in the lead truck, scanning ahead with night optics. Beckett drove, calm as ever, though his jaw was tight. Sloan sat in back, reviewing the mission feed. Their objective: intercept Crescent's convoy before it reached the border, destroy the cargo, confirm identity, exfil within 2 hours. Simple on paper, nothing ever was. As they approached the intercept point, Gray's voice crackled through the comms. Satellite confirms movement along Route 7. 3 trucks, 1 command vehicle. You'll have visual in 2 minutes. Copy, Sloan said. She looked at Beckett. Time to make friends. He smirked faintly. Your kind of friends always shoot first. She didn't deny it. The first truck appeared through the haze, headlights dimmed, cutting through dust. Sloan lifted her binoculars, zooming in on the lead vehicle. Military precision. No wasted spacing, perfect intervals. And the driver's head movement, scanning pattern, side-to-side rhythm. She knew that rhythm. She'd been taught it. Her stomach dropped. Static, she said quietly. Stop the vehicle. Beckett slowed. What's wrong? Something off. That spacing, that formation. Imani frowned. You think they're expecting us? No, Sloan whispered. I think they're training us. Before anyone could respond, the night exploded. A streak of light arced across the sky, a drone strike, precise and silent until it hit. The canyon walls lit up with fire, the shockwaves slamming into their convoy. Ambush, ambush, Imani shouted. Beckett yanked the wheel, tires skidding in sand. The rear vehicle erupted in flame. Shrapnel clanged against their doors. Sloan grabbed the comm. Shadow Wing 3 taking heavy fire. It's a trap, repeat, a trap. Static. Then a voice, calm, controlled, familiar. Captain Mercer. Her blood ran cold. The voice was Gray's. It wasn't friendly, but it was one she knew. I was wondering when they'd send you, the voice continued. You always did have a habit of flying into the impossible. Who is this? Sloan demanded, though she already knew. The voice chuckled softly. You don't recognize your own teacher. Beckett looked at her sharply. What did he just say? The voice continued. You were my best student, Sloan, but you still haven't learned the hardest rule. What rule? That loyalty and truth rarely wear the same uniform. The transmission cut out. Sloane's hands were shaking. It's him, she whispered. Rains, he's alive. Beckett stared. That's not possible, he died. He disappeared, Sloan snapped. And now he's running the network we were sent to destroy. Imani ducked as bullets shredded the windshield. You want to debate history later or survive first? Drive, Sloan yelled. They tore down the canyon, engines roaring, dust billowing. The rearview mirror filled with headlights, trucks chasing them, engines howling like wolves. 2 vehicles on our 6, Beckett shouted. Sloan leaned out the window, firing controlled bursts. One truck swerved, hit a rock, flipped. The second kept coming. Imani grenade launcher. Imani popped up through the hatch, aimed, fired. The explosion ripped the desert open, sending the second truck tumbling into fire. Clear, she shouted. Not for long, Beckett said grimly. We're burning fuel fast. Sloan keyed the comm. Gray, do you copy? We've been compromised. Rains is leading the operation. Static again. Signal's dead, Imani said. Sloan looked out the window. The horizon glowed with approaching lights, another column of vehicles moving fast. He's not just running a smuggling route, she said. He's building an army. Beckett tightened his grip on the wheel. Then what's the play? Her mind raced. We get to high ground, find cover, and make him talk. Imani shot her a look. You want to talk to the man trying to kill us? I want to understand why. They veered off the road, climbing a rocky ridge. Dust filled the air, engines straining. When they reached the top, the horizon was alive, dozens of headlights cutting through the dark. It wasn't a convoy, it was a force. Jesus, Beckett muttered. He's got at least 50 men down there. Sloan stepped out, scanning with binoculars. The wind whipped her hair across her face. Then a voice through loudspeaker, echoing across the canyon. Stand down, Captain Mercer. You're surrounded. Her breath caught. Come down, the voice continued. Let's talk, you owe me that much. Beckett looked at her. This is insane, he's baiting you. Maybe, she said softly. But if I don't go, he'll chase us until we're dust. Imani shook her head. You walk down there, you don't walk back up. Sloane's eyes stayed fixed on the lights below. Then you better have the engines running. She slung her rifle and started down the slope. Beckett cursed under his breath. She's lost her mind. Imani looked after her. No, she's finding it again. The ground was hard-packed sand and stone, the heat still radiating from the day. Sloane's boots crunched as she walked toward the center of the canyon. And there he was. Colonel David Rains. Older now, hair silver at the edges, but his eyes, those same blue, unflinching eyes, hadn't changed. He smiled when he saw her. You always were predictable, Sloan. She stopped 10 paces away. You should be dead. Maybe I was. The Air Force just didn't like what came back. You're running weapons for warlords. I'm rebalancing power, he said simply. The same system that buried you buried me long before. The difference is I stopped asking permission. Sloane's hands clenched. You're justifying murder. I'm justifying necessity. You think Shadow Wing's any different. You think your orders come from angels. His tone was calm, almost gentle, and that made it worse. You taught me to protect people, she said. I taught you to see clearly. You still can't. He stepped closer. Tell me, Sloan, when you disobeyed orders in Iraq, when you risked everything to save those Delta men, did the system reward you, or did it discard you? Her silence was answer enough. He nodded slowly. The machine doesn't want heroes, it wants obedience. I refuse to obey. And I refuse to become what you are, she said. He smiled faintly. Then you'll die believing rules still matter. He raised his hand. His men lifted their rifles. Sloane's earpiece crackled Beckett's voice. Now. Her eyes stayed locked on Rains. Now. The ridge erupted. Beckett's grenade launcher fired, explosions cascading through the canyon. Sloan dove for cover, grabbing her pistol. Fire lit the night. Rains ducked behind a truck, shouting orders. She moved fast, sprinting between blasts. Sloan, Beckett yelled, "We need to go." But she wasn't ready, not yet. She fired a burst toward Rains' position. He didn't flinch, just smiled through the smoke. Then the ground shook, another explosion, closer this time. Dust filled the air. Rains vanished behind the flames. "Target lost," Imani called. Sloan ran to where he'd stood. Nothing, just heat and dust. He was gone again. Hours later, back at base, Sloan sat alone in the debriefing tent. Her uniform was scorched, her hands still trembling. Gray entered quietly. "Report says you engaged the target. Confirm visual." Sloan nodded. It was him, Rains. Gray's eyes darkened. "Then it's worse than we thought." "He's building something," Sloan said. "Something big, and he's not hiding anymore." Gray exhaled. Then Shadow Wing's next mission just found its purpose. Sloan looked at her, tired, haunted, but resolute. Then so did I. Outside, dawn broke again, the desert painted in blood-red light. Some wars don't end, they just change names. And for Sloan Mercer, the real battle was only beginning. What if the man you were hunting believed he was saving the same people you swore to protect? That question had followed Sloan Mercer for weeks. It haunted her in briefings, in the roar of jet engines, in every empty second of silence when the world finally stopped screaming. Colonel David Rains, the man who taught her everything about survival, precision, and instinct, had become the kind of ghost that intelligence agencies whispered about. His name didn't exist in any database. His face was erased from archives. But his work was everywhere. Sloan stared at the projection screen in the dim operations bay. Satellite images flickered, weapons convoys, border movements, encrypted communications, all coordinated, all deliberate. And every one of them traced back to him. Agent Gray stood at the head of the room, arms folded. Shadow Wing has been ordered to locate and dismantle Rains' network. Primary objective: recover or eliminate the target. Secondary: confirm if any U.S. technology has been leaked. Sloan's jaw tightened. "You mean if he had help?" Gray nodded. "Rains didn't vanish alone. Someone's funding him, feeding him intel." Beckett leaned back in his chair, fatigue etched in every line of his face. "So we're not just chasing a ghost. We're chasing whoever, keeping the ghost alive." Gray's eyes flicked to Sloan. "Exactly." The screen went dark. The hum of the projector faded. "Gear up," Gray said. "We leave at dawn." That night Sloan couldn't sleep. The barracks were quiet, too quiet. She sat on her bunk, staring at a single sheet of paper in her hands, an intercepted message recovered from Rains' camp. It read only 4 words. "We are not enemies." She turned it over again and again. The handwriting wasn't typed, it was his, sharp, controlled, familiar. Beckett entered quietly, his boots barely making a sound. He held 2 mugs of coffee. "Figured you weren't sleeping." She accepted one. "You'd win that bet." He sat beside her, sighing. "You think it's really him writing those?" "I know it is." Beckett took a sip, grimacing. "He's taunting you." "No," Sloan said softly. "He's testing me like he used to." He looked at her. "Sloan, if you keep thinking of him as your teacher, you'll hesitate when you should shoot." Her grip on the mug tightened. "Maybe, but I won't stop trying to understand why." Beckett frowned. "Understanding him won't stop him." She met his eyes. "Maybe not, but it might stop me from becoming him." He didn't answer, didn't need to. The silence between them said enough. The next morning, Shadow Wing flew into Syria under cloud cover. The mission brief was short. Rain's lieutenants were meeting in an abandoned airbase near Palmyra. The objective: capture one alive. The helicopter dropped them 2 miles out. The desert was cold, the stars harsh and bright. They moved in silence: Sloan, Beckett, Imani, and a new operative named Vargas, a former Marine with eyes that had seen too much. As they approached the perimeter, the airfield came into view: broken hangars, rusted towers, the skeletons of aircraft long forgotten. But in the distance, floodlights glowed: trucks, men, activity. Beckett crouched beside Sloan, scanning through his scope. At least 20 hostiles, maybe 30, they're heavily armed. Sloan's voice was calm. "We don't need 30, we just need one who can talk." They moved forward in the shadows, soundless, patient. The cold wind bit against their faces. The smell of diesel and dust filled the air. Imani pointed toward the hangar. "There, command tent, likely where the lieutenants are holed up." Sloan nodded. "Vargas, take west flank. Beckett, cover entry. Imani with me." They crept forward. Every step was measured. Every breath counted. At 20 meters, a guard turned too soon. His flashlight beam swept across the sand. "Contact," Imani hissed. Sloan moved first, a flash of motion, a silent strike. The guard dropped before he could shout, but the light hit the tent and a shout followed from inside. "Go," she ordered. The team surged forward. Gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes lighting the night. Beckett's rifle barked from the ridge, covering them. Imani breached the tent door. Inside, chaos. Men scrambled for weapons, shouting in Arabic. Sloan moved through them like a storm, precise, surgical. 2 down, 3. One tried to run. Imani dropped him with a controlled burst. And then silence. Sloan's eyes swept the room. 2 men were still alive, one clutching his leg, the other trembling with his hands up. "Who's in charge?" she demanded in Arabic. The man hesitated. You're the Raven." Her heart stopped for a beat. "What did you call me?" He swallowed. "Rains told us you'd come." Imani's eyes widened. He knew. Sloan grabbed the man's collar. "Where is he?" The man shook his head. "He's gone, but he said he'd see you soon." Then his eyes darted past her, something in the corner. A small device blinking red. "Grenade," Beckett shouted through comms. Sloan dove. The explosion tore through the tent: heat, light, sand, pain. When the dust settled, everything was ringing. Her ears buzzed. Her body felt weightless. "Imani," she called out. Here, Imani's voice weak but alive. Beckett's voice followed through static. "Sloan, you're hit." She checked, blood on her sleeve, but nothing fatal. "I'm good, Vargas." No response. The tent was gone, the lieutenants dead. Smoke rose from the wreckage. Then her comm crackled again, but it was Beckett. It was him. "Still following orders, I see," Rain's voice said softly. "Still chasing shadows they tell you to hunt." Sloan's breath caught. "Where are you?" "I'm where I've always been, ahead of you." "You're killing innocent people, David." "And you think you are." His words landed like bullets. "You think Shadow Wing answers to justice. They answer to survival. And when survival demands a monster, they'll let you become one until they don't need you anymore." "Then why are you warning me?" she asked. "Because I taught you to survive. And if you keep following orders, you won't." The line went dead. Beckett's voice came back in, cutting through static. "Sloan, we've got reinforcements moving in, 30, maybe more. We need to go." She hesitated just for a second, then grabbed Imani's arm. "Move." They sprinted through the ruins, the night alive with gunfire. The extraction chopper was inbound, blades chopping through the dark. As they reached the ridge, Beckett opened fire, clearing their path. The helo descended, kicking up dust and debris. "Go, go." Vargas's voice came through. He was alive, covering their flank, his rifle barking fire into the dark. Sloan turned. "Come on." He shook his head. "You first, I'll cover." "Vargas. Go." She climbed aboard, grabbing Imani's arm as the bird lifted off. Through the open door, she saw Vargas fall, gunfire stitching the ground beside him. Then he was gone. The helicopter rose, leaving the inferno behind. No one spoke. Imani sat slumped, face streaked with ash. Beckett stared out the window, jaw clenched. Sloan's hands trembled in her lap. Another ghost added to the list. Hours later, back at base, she stormed into the ops center. Gray was waiting. "You knew," Sloan said. "You knew Rains was baiting us." Gray's expression didn't shift. "We suspected it. And you sent us anyway." Gray's tone was calm. "We needed confirmation. You got it." Sloan took a step closer, her voice low, dangerous. "We lost Vargas because of your confirmation. Shadow Wing doesn't operate in comfort, Captain. You knew what you signed up for." Sloan stared at her. "You sound just like him." That made Gray pause just slightly. "Meaning?" "Rains. He said the same thing. That we all serve something that uses us until it doesn't need us." Gray's eyes flickered, then hardened. Rains betrayed his country. Don't confuse his logic with truth. But Sloan could hear it, that subtle shift in Gray's tone, a crack in the armor. She turned to leave. "Where are you going?" Gray asked. Sloan stopped at the door, to find out who's really giving the orders. Later, alone in the hangar, Sloan sat in front of the C-130 again, the same one that had once carried her back from the impossible. Its scars still lined the hull, a memory in metal. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass. She barely recognized it. Beckett appeared behind her. "You think she's hiding something?" "I think they all are." He stepped closer. "Then what's next?" She looked up, eyes steady, voice low. "We find Rains before command finds us." He nodded slowly. "You realize that means going rogue?" "Maybe we already are." The wind howled outside, rattling the hangar doors. Beckett looked at her for a long time, then smiled faintly. "Guess old habits die hard." Sloan looked out into the dark horizon, the same horizon that had taken so much and given so little. "Maybe," she said softly, "but some of us don't die at all. We just keep flying until the truth shows itself." How many times can a person defy orders before they stop belonging anywhere? Sloan Mercer didn't know anymore. All she knew was that somewhere beyond the horizon, the man who'd once been her compass was turning the world into a lie, and the people she trusted were helping him do it. The storm came at dawn. Not in the sky, but in her mind. The decision had been building for days. The whispers from Rains, the evasions from Gray, the unanswered questions that echoed louder with every mission. So she made her choice. She and Beckett left before sunrise. No orders, no authorization, no backup. Just coordinates stolen from Gray's encrypted drive, a mountain range near the Syrian border, where a satellite had caught a flicker of heat signatures 2 nights ago. "That's him," Beckett had said. "Has to be." And now, hours later, their transport skimmed the edge of the desert in silence. The landscape below was all rock and ruin, a graveyard of forgotten wars. Beckett adjusted the radar scope. No transmissions, no patrols. Either he's gone or he's waiting for us. "He's waiting," Sloan said quietly. "He always liked control." They landed the bird 5 miles from the coordinates and began the hike. The wind howled through the canyons, carrying whispers of sand that stung the skin. The sky above was iron gray, the light fractured and thin. Beckett trudged behind her, rifle slung over his shoulder. You ever notice how every mission that starts with "we shouldn't be here" turns into the kind that changes everything? Sloan smiled faintly. "You still in for it?" "Always," he said, then softer. "But if this goes bad, we don't run, we finish it." She nodded. By noon they reached the ridge. Below them, a hidden valley. Tents, equipment, vehicles painted in mismatched camouflage, a base not large but organized. And at its center, the unmistakable figure of Colonel David Rains, standing beside a makeshift control tower, headset in hand. Beckett lowered the scope. It's him, no question. Sloan exhaled, slow and steady. We end this today. They moved at dusk. Shadows stretched long over the camp. Guards smoked near generators. The hum of machinery masked their approach. Sloan and Beckett split, he to the perimeter, she to the center. Silent, focused. Every footstep felt like a memory, each one pulling her closer to the man who'd once told her the sky was the only place truth still lived. Now, even the sky felt like it had lied. She reached the main tent. Light spilled from inside. Voices murmured in English. She paused, hand hovering over her sidearm, then pushed through the flap. Rains was there, alone, seated at a table covered in maps and circuit boards. He didn't flinch when she entered. He didn't even reach for his weapon. Instead, he smiled. Took you long enough. End of the road, she said quietly. For one of us, he replied. She stepped closer. You killed good men, David. You trained me to be better than this. I trained you to see, he said, voice calm. And what you saw scared you. The world isn't divided by nations anymore, Sloan. It's divided by control. Shadow Wing doesn't serve America, it serves whoever signs the next check. She froze. What are you talking about? He stood, packing slowly. Gray's handlers, they're not DIA, they're private. Contractors. Shadow Wing is a ghost project, plausible deniability for operations the government doesn't want to own. You think you're fighting for justice. You're cleaning their messes. Her throat tightened. You're lying. He looked at her, pity in his eyes. Am I? He reached into a folder and tossed a small device onto the table. A data drive marked with the Shadow Wing insignia. Black budget transfers, satellite authorizations, proof, everything. She stared at it, the little piece of metal that might shatter everything she'd believed since Fallujah. Rain spoke softly. You wanted to understand why I left. It wasn't betrayal. It was refusal. I stopped letting them use me to prop up wars they already lost. Her voice cracked. So you started your own. I gave power to people who needed it, to those who never had it. And how many innocent people died for that power, she demanded. His jaw tightened. Innocence is a privilege of the comfortable. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the low hum of generators filled the air. Then she said it quietly, but with all the weight in the world. You're wrong. He met her eyes. About what? About who I am. He sighed, stepping closer. You can't save them, Sloan. You can only choose who benefits from their pain. That's what war is. That's what it's always been. She raised her weapon. Maybe, but I still get to choose the kind of person I am in it. His smile faded. Then you've already lost. He reached for something under the table, fast, deliberate. She fired first. The shot echoed through the tent. Rain staggered back, hand pressed to his chest. Blood bloomed through his shirt. He fell against the maps, breath shallow. Sloan stood frozen, her weapon trembling. He looked up at her one last time, pain and pride twisted together. You did what I taught you. No, she whispered, I did what I had to. He smiled faintly, almost relieved. Good girl. Then he was gone. Beckett burst into the tent moments later. Sloan, you okay? She didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the drive on the table. He saw it too. What is that? Everything, she said quietly. Gunfire erupted outside the camp, reacting, chaos spreading. Beckett grabbed her arm. We have to move. Sloan snatched the drive and followed. They sprinted through fire and dust, weaving between trucks as explosions tore through the camp. Extraction points East Ridge, Beckett shouted. They reached the valley edge as their evac helo dropped low, rotors slicing the air. Imani leaned out the side door, waving frantically. "Come on." Beckett climbed aboard first. Sloan was right behind him until something caught her eye. The control tower. Inside, a terminal still glowed, communications active, data uploading. If that drive contained what Rains claimed, and the upload completed, Shadow Wing would erase itself before she could prove a word of it. She turned back. "Sloan," Beckett shouted, "what are you doing?" "Finishing it." She sprinted for the tower. The helo lifted slightly, engines whining. Bullets tore the sand around her, but she didn't stop. She burst through the door, raced to the console, and yanked the drive from her vest. The upload bar, 94%, 95%. "No, you don't," she muttered, jamming the drive into the terminal's port. Sparks flew. The system froze. Then the screen went black. She exhaled. "Got you." "Mercer," Beckett's voice thundered in her earpiece. "We're out of time." She turned and ran. Outside, the camp was burning. The air was thick with smoke and heat. She dove for the helicopter as it lifted, Beckett's hand catching hers, dragging her inside. The helo climbed, leaving the inferno below. For a long time, no one spoke. Finally, Beckett asked, "Did you get it?" She nodded, holding up the drive. "Yeah, but what's on here might burn everything." He looked at her, tired and proud all at once. "Then maybe it's time something did." Hours later, they landed at an undisclosed base. Not one Gray knew. Beckett had rerouted them mid-flight, using old access codes from his days in logistics. In a quiet hangar, they sat across from each other, the drive between them on a steel table. Sloan stared at it for a long time. "You think exposing it changes anything?" Beckett asked softly. "No," she said, "but silence changes less." He nodded. "Then what now?" She looked out the hangar doors. Dawn was breaking again. Another sunrise over another battlefield. "We deliver the truth," she said, "even if no one wants it." Beckett smirked faintly. "That's going to make a lot of powerful people angry." "Good," she said. "Let them finally feel something." He leaned back, smiling. "You realize you just went from soldier to whistleblower overnight." She picked up the drive. The sunlight caught the metal edge, small, cold, and impossibly heavy. "Maybe," she said quietly, "but I never joined to serve power. I joined to serve people." 3 weeks later, the leaks began. Encrypted files, mission orders, names, transfers. Every secret Rains had claimed, verified and real. Shadow Wing was dismantled quietly, its existence never officially acknowledged. The DIA disavowed everything. Agent Gray disappeared. And Captain Sloan Mercer was nowhere to be found. Rumors said she fled overseas. Some claimed she died in an accident. Others whispered that she still flew, off-grid, under no flag. But those who knew her, really knew her, said otherwise. They said she'd simply gone back to the one place she'd always belonged. The sky. Months later, somewhere over the Indian Ocean, a cargo aircraft glided through moonlight. No markings, no registration, just a black silhouette against the stars. Inside, Sloan sat alone in the cockpit, hands steady on the controls. Beckett's voice came from the co-pilot's seat, half asleep, half smiling. "Still flying into trouble." She smiled faintly. "Trouble flies faster than peace." He chuckled. "Still think it was worth it?" She didn't answer immediately. Outside, the ocean shimmered, endless, silent. Finally, she said, "I think truth is the only thing that can still fly without fuel." He grinned. "You always did talk like a poet when you're tired." "Maybe," she said softly, "but maybe that's all we have left, the poetry of what's right." The radio crackled faintly, distant chatter from somewhere they didn't belong. Sloan adjusted altitude, eyes sharp on the horizon. "New heading?" Beckett asked. She smiled. wherever someone's forgotten what honor means. The engines rumbled. The plane rose higher, cutting into the dawn. And as the first light spilled across the clouds, her voice came quiet, resolute, the kind that carries long after it fades. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The camera would follow the plane, that solitary bird across the horizon, until it disappeared into light. Because legends don't end. They ascend.